All right, welcome everybody to session four, business operations and legal considerations. Super excited for this session. I know a lot of you have been holding on to some questions for this session. We'll start with our usual small group check-in. I'm going to go ahead and set up the breakout rooms. And while I do that, Jen, if you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background, this would be a great time to do that.
Terrific. Thanks. Appreciate it. Hey guys, I'm Jen Riza, and I actually know one or two of you in other ways. So I'm just so pleased to see you here again. And that you are also affiliated with Women Venture, which I think is just a terrific organization. And I really enjoy teaching this small business essentials, legal and compliance considerations class. So today we are going to talk about the different kinds of forms of entity, LLCs, corporations, etc. We're going to talk about the different ways that things can be taxed. And then we're going to do a little bit of an introduction to thinking about licensing and other kinds of regulatory concerns. I know that that sounds super exciting and sexy. It's really, we're going to make it fun. It's going to be okay. Bear with me. And I hope to help you. I hope that by the end of this session, you guys will feel like you have a better handle on what you want to do and what your next steps are in those areas, as well as hopefully answering your questions. Sorry, I didn't do a very good job of introducing myself. Okay, I am a lawyer. I'm a business lawyer by training. I am now the head of business and cannabis law at North Star Law Group in St. Paul, where I help small entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs in the Minnesota's cannabis industry, stand up successful and compliant businesses. So we won't talk about cannabis too much tonight, unless you want, but we'll keep it more general tonight.
Alrighty, I've got those breakout rooms set up for you guys. And I just need to set, they're going to close automatically after 5 minutes. Okay. So I am opening those rooms right now and it should automatically take you to them. Let me know if you have any problems. You can just send me a message in the chat. Right, and there's Lily. One. Lily, you should be able to just, oh, no, I see. Okay, I just assigned you to room one, Lily. We're just doing our small group check-in.
I definitely screwed up. I'm sorry. How do I go back to my...
That's okay. I have to move you to another room and then move you back to your room. So just bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
All right. They're all in their little rooms chatting. So we'll be back with them probably in about 4 minutes, Jen. Okay. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome, welcome. We're just waiting for a few folks to finish up, it looks like. Give them a few more seconds. Oh, Hannah and Susan are having a really good convo, I bet. All right. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Susan. Welcome back. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's session. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. For the next hour and a little change, you're going to be hearing from Jen about legal considerations. And then if there's time, which maybe there won't be, so please feel free to go to the bathroom if you need to. This is recorded, and I will put the recording on Talent LMS. But make sure you take breaks for yourself if you need them, because we almost never have time for the break in the session. It's like wishful thinking break. And then I'll talk a little bit about the 101 of operations. Our objectives today, we hope you leave with an understanding of the legal and regulatory requirements for starting and operating a business. We also hope that you kind of get those key aspects of operations, including logistics, efficiency improvements, POS systems, you know, how to structure your organization. We'll talk about a little bit of all of that. Part one of tonight, which legal structure is best for you? And I will pass it off to Jen.
Terrific. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. So do me a favor, if it's possible for you to have your camera on, love to see your faces. Helps me understand if people are understanding what I'm talking about or if they have questions. Also, feel free to write questions or comments in the chat as we go, especially with a bigger class. I find that that really helps me sort of keep rolling, but also understand where you guys are at and what you are hoping to know. So on that note, could you please drop in the chat if there's something that, let's see, please drop in the chat. Have you already formed an LLC or another entity or not? Go ahead and chat to me and tell me that. And let's advance to the next slide, please. All right. Ooh, okay. A nice mix here. Some folks have done their entities, mostly LLCs, which is awesome. That's what I would expect to see. Other folks are still doing it in the future, so that's great. Okay, this will be a good intro, I think, for all of that. So I like to use the term legal entity because that includes whether you're an LLC, a corporation, a partnership, whatever, okay? The reason that we form a legal entity as a small business is because it creates a separate and distinct legal entity from you and your personal property. And so when we do business through that separate entity like an LLC, then if we do it properly, our personal assets like our house, our car, etc., our bank account for a family should not have to be used to satisfy business debts. Super important, right? We want the business to remain separate from us as an individual. And so one of the first steps that we do to do that is by forming an entity to hold the business. And that is also why some people have multiple entities to hold multiple businesses or multiple, you know, properties or whatever. I see Shauna is saying that she's starting a new one, so perhaps that's why. The other reason that we use legal entities a lot is for tax planning purposes. Because the legal entity is a separate entity, then we can make some choices about how the taxes that are going to be needed to be paid on the monies that our business is generating are taxed. Are they part of our personal tax return, or does the business file its own taxes, etc.? Next slide, please. Thanks. So some of the key things that we want to think about are who owns the business and where do we want those tax liabilities to sit? Let's go forward.
He's fine, babe. I'm muted and it's class now. We're just sitting and it's fine. The more you suppress him, the harder it's gonna be.
I'm not sure who I can hear talking, but I think maybe you're talking to someone else. Or did you mean to be talking to me?
I don't think Hannah was talking to you. Hannah, were you?
Yeah, okay, that's okay. They're doing something else. That's cool.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so if we were in a law school class, we would go through this whole list, okay, of the different entities that are available and the different ways that those entities work. I'm gonna fly through this really fast because oh, no worries. Also, I'd love to see babies. If you wanna come on video but muted, that would be super cute. But whatever works for you guys is great. Okay. So, certainly some forms of entity are more complex and expensive. Some allow us more flexibility in different ways. But you know what? To cut to the chase, the LLC is the form of entity of choice for most small businesses in America today. Excuse me. And that's because it combines flexibility around tax implications with and other management control and decision-making flexibility with being pretty easy to set up and to operate. And so it's really become the structure of choice for most businesses. All right, let's move forward. All right, so the other kinds of choices that you might see are a sole proprietorship, a partnership, which you could also call a general partnership, a limited partnership, the LLC, my fave, an S Corp, formerly an S corporation, a C Corp, a B Corp, or a nonprofit. We'll get back to what some of those are a little bit later. Next slide, please. So if you have just one person and you are conducting business activity, but you have not filed to be an LLC or any other legal entity, then congratulations, you are a sole proprietorship by default. Okay, sole proprietorship is the automatic form of a one-person business. So for instance, if I sell my neighbors some eggs from my chickens, but I haven't done anything else to form as a business, I'm a sole proprietor. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when we're doing a small amount of business or we're just getting started, especially if that business doesn't have a lot of risk or debt involved. Sole proprietor is really easy, really, really easy, and not a ton of downside. Okay, but here is the downside, is that the business is not legally separate from the owner. So to the extent that the business incurs debts or has liabilities, then the sole proprietor as the owner is responsible for those, as opposed to being able to say, oh, those belong to the business and not to me personally. Let's go to the next slide. All right. I kind of already said this, but it's easy and inexpensive. You're just the one person. So for better or worse, you have full control of all business decisions and you retain all profits and pay all expenses. Also notice the tax treatment stuff, okay? The tax treatment is exactly what you would expect when you're not a business. You're gonna pay your personal income tax on profits, right? I got 10 bucks for the quail eggs. I mean, there are some de minimis exceptions, but let's say that's going really well. If I make enough money to need to report that to the IRS, then that'll just come on my personal tax return. And we also don't have to pay unemployment taxes or workers' comp insurance like you'll see that we do with some of the other more sophisticated forms of entity. All right, next slide, please. So disadvantages, you're personally liable. Now, let's push this conversation forward. Two other reasons that are disadvantages of a sole proprietor is that lenders not only may prefer to do business with an entity, they're going to require you to have an entity if you are in fact getting a business bank account. And that's, I often see people figure out that they need to form an LLC after they go talk to a bank. And the bank's like, well, where's your LLC paperwork? You know what? Which is okay. All right. So that's often a time that people end up forming that LLC. The other big disadvantage of a sole proprietorship is that once you add another person who is an owner, once you add a partner in your business, then you are by default a general partnership, and that is not a great thing to be. Let me explain. Next slide, please. All right. So legally, a partnership is an association of two or more persons who own a business together for profit. They don't have to actually call each other partners, but just the fact of them working together on this business where they both expect to share in the profits makes them partners under law. And that includes various kind of pitfalls that we would like to avoid and that we can avoid by going ahead and becoming an LLC instead. If you are a partnership, a good practice is to have a formal written partnership agreement. Excuse me. That's going to address issues like who owns this thing and in what percentages? How does this entity make decisions? And what happens if somebody dies or wants to leave? Those are things that we can agree up front in this written contract called something like a partnership agreement. And that basically acts as a prenup for the business. All right, next slide, please. So advantages of partnership, I said it's the default form. It's really easy to establish. In fact, congratulations, it's what you have. If you have more than two partners and you are doing business, or you have two partners and you're doing business together, it's nice to have a partner, right? Different skills, shared financial commitment. You split the profit or the loss with them, and you can motivate employees, because if they can be a partner, then they're also motivated to want to increase the business revenues and so forth. Okay, but there's big disadvantages. Next slide, please. Partners are personally and jointly liable for all partnership obligations. Okay, and each partner is bound by the actions of the other partner. So what that means is, for instance, if you have a partner and they order, $1,000 of supplies, and so my partner orders $1,000 supplies, I don't even know about it, I am still personally liable for that $1,000 of supply order, even if I didn't authorize it and my partner wasn't going to do it. So that's a bad surprise, right? And personally and jointly liable means that the counterparty, the person to whom you owe the liability or debt, can go against either of the partners. So I would suggest, do not be in a general partner situation. Instead, go ahead and get out of it by filing an LLC. Next slide, please. All right, so the LLC is our flexible modern form. One of the great things about it is can be owned by one or more than one owners. We can have a sole member LLC or a multi-member LLC, same difference. Okay, also in the LLC context, I also strongly urge you to have a formal written operating agreement, which is basically the same as that partnership agreement we talked about before, but it's for the LLC. And that's going to say who owns this thing and in what percentages, how does it make decisions, and what happens if somebody dies or wants to leave, which we could also call buy-sell arrangements. That's a term that you hear sometimes as well. Next slide. So advantages of an LLC, it protects those personal assets from the business liabilities. Those counterparties can't go against your house or car, etc., to satisfy those debts if you do it properly. It's easy to add or subtract partners. It doesn't affect the form of entity. Finally, interestingly, an LLC has some tax flexibility. So the default is that profits and losses pass through the company to its owners for tax purposes. For instance, if I and Emily are 50-50 partners in a business in our LLC, and our LLC earns $100 in profit this year, then we will both report $50 of profit on our personal tax return as income and pay the IRS, its share on those $50. Trying to make the numbers easy here, right? You also can choose to be taxed in different ways by filing additional forms with the IRS. You could choose to be taxed as a corporation or as an S corp, if that was more advantageous to you, on the advice of accounting professionals. So it's nice that the LLC has that flexibility. Next slide. Now, disadvantages of an LLC. It is not automatic. You have to make a filing to form it. And in Minnesota, you have to make an annual free maintenance filing to keep it alive. And that's because a lot of people file LLCs and then a lot of them don't do anything with it or go on with their lives, whatever. And so the Minnesota Secretary of State has to have some way to not have there be a billion LLCs. And so what they do is make you file an annual filing sometime in each calendar, like it's due December 31 of each calendar year. And if you fail to file it, plus a grace period, then your LLC is administratively dissolved, which means that you go back to being a sole proprietor if you're just one person, or a partnership if you're multiple people. Okay, so if you form an LLC, just know you're going to have to do that renewal yearly. The Secretary of State is pretty good about sending email follow-ups, but sometimes people change email or whatever, so they miss it. You can also, by the way, if you are behind, make little catch-up filings to bring yourself back into compliance if it hasn't been too long. Another disadvantage here is that protection for personal assets by using the LLC isn't automatic. We need to run our business operations through the LLC to get liability protection. Okay, so the LLC should have a bank account, and that bank account is where money comes in and money comes out for the business. To the extent that a business owner commingles business funds with individual funds, then it's more likely that a debtor could say, well, I should be able to claim against their personal funds because they weren't distinguished from the business funds. They weren't in a separate place. Okay, so now I will say, as an entrepreneur myself, this is probably something that you're not doing a great job of as you are starting towards launching your business. And that's okay. I would just say as a future point, either at launch or soon after, aim to have your business monies going through the LLC as opposed to you personally, and then you have a little Excel accounting where you put money in. I'm describing what I did in my first startup. Okay, like I'm not because keeping those good records and that differentiation will be really important, even though it's annoying. Okay, another disadvantage is net income is subject to self-employment taxes. Okay, so now that we're in the LLC situation, even if we're a sole member LLC, we also owe self-employment taxes, meaning that we're paying into the government funds for those kind of unemployment benefits, etc. All right, next slide, please. All right, quickly, other types of ownership structures you might hear about. Limited partnerships, kind of an interesting thing, also kind of a fun word or set of words. A limited partnership is an older style of entity form where it was set up to have some active owners who they called partners, and then some passive investors who put in their money, but then weren't part of actually running the organization. And that's why they're limited. They have limited liability because they have limited involvement. All right, you can see how the LLC is better because the LLC could have active or passive people involved, and they all have that liability protection that we keep talking about. Corporations. Corporations are the main kind of entity for larger businesses in the US. For instance, when we think about the Fortune 500 or the businesses listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the vast majority of them are corporations. They're taxed somewhat differently. The business itself is going to file a tax return where it is taxed on the profits as well, instead of, those flowing through to the owners. Now, to the extent that a corporation makes distributions or dividends, obviously the owners need to pay tax on that as well. And so that's why the corporation is sometimes criticized as double taxation. right? Taxation at the corporate level and at the shareholder level. Corporation also has more complex rules for governance, the kinds of documents that you need to do and the processes you need to do to keep it alive. That's not bad. It just adds expense and complexity, which is usually too much for the small entrepreneur. If your business does indeed take off and become, a more substantial business, you can always convert to a corporation later when it makes sense to do that. So don't worry. All right, and then finally, you may see benefit corporations out there. This is a form that was started because of the concern that a corporation legally is supposed to make decisions in the best interests of its shareholders. And so people pointed out that means that they're not making decisions in the best interest of their employees or the environment or the community. And so to the extent that a group of people starting a company are especially wanting to act in the interests of those kind of people, a B corporation allows them to explicitly say in their setup documents that they're going to put those kind of concerns first. There are some big companies out there that are B Corps. Patagonia is one. They give a lot of money to the environment as opposed to distributing it to shareholders. But the B Corporation is largely kind of an interesting idea that not a ton of people are actually doing these days. There are, of course, nonprofits. I love nonprofits. I was actually in the nonprofit world before I went back to law school. But I will tell you that usually people that are looking to start a small business that they hope will pay them enough to feed their family probably don't want to start a nonprofit. And that's because in exchange for the tax benefits that you get as a nonprofit, you have pretty significant disclosure obligations to file a Form 990 with the state. You need to have a board of directors, other kinds of obligations, because a nonprofit is supposed to be acting in the interests of society, of whatever cause you have set it up to do, as opposed to being a money-making venture. And so usually when people are starting a small business, they are hoping will be their source of income. Often a nonprofit is something they think about, and I would guide them away from. We could talk about that more if you want. Remember that you can certainly do good through an LLC as well. All right, and then an S corporation is actually usually technically an LLC filed with the Secretary of State, plus you file an S corp election with the IRS to be taxed as an S corp. All right, next slide, please. All right, so just a little more on the S corp. It is also a separate entity from the owner. You've got that liability protection, but it has additional tax advantages or tax treatment that is sometimes an advantage. To cut to the chase, usually it's an advantage when you've got one or two owners who are active in the business. So for instance, a cleaning business or another service business of some kind, S corp can be a good way to save a little bit on those employment taxes and other tax credits. You should talk, if that sounds like maybe it would fit for you. The right person who can help you figure that out is an accountant as opposed to a corporate lawyer, which is what I am. Next slide, please. All right, because the S corp also has disadvantages. There are stricter operational processes. You can blow the S corp election, including you have to structure your compensation in such ways that are avoiding sort of abuses that the IRS has its eye on of those tax advantages. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so here's my recommendations. Probably you're going to form an LLC. If you have more than one partner, please enter into an operating agreement. It can really save you a world of pain down the road, but it is not required. And it's certainly not going to be filed with the state anywhere. It's a contract between you and your partner. And then you might want to talk to an accountant about whether being taxed as an S corp makes sense for you, especially if you have that 1 to 2 people service business model. All right, let's move on. All right, so let's pause there. What other questions do you guys have for me so far?
It looks like a while back, Cheryl had a question, which was, if I need a business loan, when do I file for an LLC? How soon is appropriate?
It's a great question, Cheryl. You would want to file an LLC before you talk to the banker. I'll go through a couple of steps here. But the banker is going to want to see your LLC paperwork as well as other sort of business planning paperwork in order to evaluate whether they want to make that loan.
Another question, is there a recommended minimum income threshold for an S Corp to make sense?
It's an interesting question. I don't know what the number would be, but I think your instinct is right that it doesn't make sense to work hard to, grab tax advantages if it's like $3 of tax advantages. So, I wouldn't super stress about it until you're potentially making some money. Also, I believe that you can file the S Corp election for a year that you were in until something like April of that year and have it apply to the whole calendar year. So since we are in mid-November, assuming you guys are all kind of in that pre-revenue or only a little bit of revenue stage, early next year might be the time to talk to that accountant about it if you wanted to. And I'm also thinking about Maureen's question here. If I file this year, do I do my taxes using the new structure? Is it better to wait or start now? I'm thinking about deductions.
Yeah, I'm a sole proprietor. I've been a sole proprietor. I'm a psychologist. I've been in practice forever. And I kind of have danced around the LLC question for a long time. I know it's probably past time. I should probably be doing it, but I'm trying to decide, like, is it too late for this year? And then I just worry about next year as I start the next arm of my business.
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense to do it in the next year. It's hard without having a more fulsome conversation with you about sort of, what these arms are and how much they might earn. But there are startup tax deductions. You can deduct your startup expenses, and again, talk to your CPA about this.
Right.
Which might include things like this women venture class and so forth.
Right. Well, I can write this off on my business expenses either way.
Exactly.
Right. That's right. The part that's been a question.
Yes.
So maybe it does make sense as I have more startup. I have no real startup costs this year for the new business. I will starting in January. And so to take advantage of that, maybe okay. And
yeah, I think that makes sense. Yes. And also, this is a common fact pattern for entrepreneurs that they sort of do a thing, maybe not for as long as you have, but as a psychologist, that made sense, right? But it is common for entrepreneurs to kind of do a thing, see if it makes money, see if it's working, and then once it's working, be like, oh no, I guess I was supposed to have an LLC. You know what? That is fine. That is the entrepreneurial journey. Okay, so go ahead and form your LLC and move forward with it. You can also assign liabilities and assets to an LLC. Oh, I'm just going to mute you, Maureen. Nope, I'm sorry, I'm not able to. Could you go, please? Oh, Lily's bringing up the FinCEN. Yes, I will get there actually, Lily. That's a good point. Yes, BOI. Okay, yes, we will get there in just a second. Thank you for raising that. Okay. All right, so let's talk about how you form an LLC. Now, about half of you have already done this. Good job. You do not need to pay a lawyer or a weird online service to file an LLC. At least in Minnesota, it's really pretty easy to do yourself. And you've got the links to do it in your packet here. Okay. All states have an LLC form. I'm just going to keep saying the Minnesota Secretary of State, but if somebody lives in Wisconsin or whatever, you might want to consider Wisconsin. Okay, so you're going to file with the Secretary of State to form your entity. You also could choose to file a thing called a DBA, which is also called an assumed name. That's optional, but it's a choice that people sometimes make if they want to use a name for their business that is different than its actual legal name. I've run into this in kind of two different scenarios. One is some people have an LLC that they made a while ago that has a name that no longer really reflects what they're doing, but they want to keep using the same LLC, you know, because it has a bank account and it's whatever, it's going okay. And so they'll file a DBA with the name of the business that they are doing now. That's a perfectly fine use of a DBA. That's another file. So the DBA filing is another filing with the Secretary of State. And also remember, if you do DBA, you have to do the step called publication, where you are actually giving notice to the world that you are using this DBA by publishing it in a newspaper in the county in which your main office is located. It's really very archaic. But anyway, your DBA is not effective unless you also do that publication step. Okay, let's go on and talk about the other things. All right, so good resources from Minnesota Secretary of State. Let's keep going. These links are in your packet. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So maybe I don't have a slide about FinCEN. Let's talk about FinCEN and then we'll talk about when to form an entity. Okay. So in addition to filing for your LLC, you also have a couple other coordinated filings that you're going to make. You're going to file for a tax ID, both federally and with Minnesota, assuming that you're making sales in Minnesota. And those are called an EIN, an entity identification number with the IRS, and a Minnesota state tax ID. I think I touch on those later on the tax slides. Also on your list is this thing called a FinCEN filing, or a BOI, beneficial ownership filing. That's the same idea. We're just making that filing with this FinCEN governmental arm. And this is a relatively new filing, which is why everybody is stressed about it. It just became effective January 1st of this year. And it was in response to the fact that it is hard for law enforcement and others to know who owns LLCs, because there's very little information that's required to give about an LLC when you form it. And so people, you know, not us, but other people, right, figured out that they can use the LLC for money laundering and otherwise, you know, hiding assets, doing things. And so the federal government now requires everybody who forms an LLC to also make a FinCEN filing that says who owns the LLC. And you're going to have to update it if that ownership changes. It's kind of a pain. One of the good things about it is at least it's free. But it's an additional step. And so when you file your LLC, you will get documentation from the Minnesota Secretary of State that says like, and don't forget, you also have to do the FinCEN filing. Here's the link. So now you know, that's what that is. I do recommend that you do it. I mean, who knows? I suppose it might be revoked under the new administration, but it just became effective in January. And so they're just starting to kind of like, okay, we really mean it, you guys. We're going to start doing fines and penalties for people that don't do it, etc. So, okay, so now let's talk about when to form an entity. All right. So I said sometimes it's part of the entrepreneurial journey that we don't file an entity exactly at the right time. That's fine. We're just going to do our best. Okay. I advise don't form an entity like as one of your very first steps. Do a lot of other exploring, and then go ahead and file it when you're committed to launch. In part, that's because you're picking a name for your LLC as well. And so you may find sometimes that you would pick a different name later in your process than earlier in your process. Though also you can amend the names of LLCs if you need to, and you can also file a DBA. So if that's the soup you're in, you do have options. But committed to launch. I also recommend that you get your website. If assuming that you want to have a website that has basically the same name as your LLC, I recommend that you reserve your website first on GoDaddy.com or wherever, because there are savvy people who watch the LLC filings and then buy the matching website addresses, so then they can sell them back to entrepreneurs at a little bit of a profit. So pick your name, get the website address, file the LLC. I also see people form an entity when they need the business bank account. We already said that. That's a very reasonable time to do it. Ideally, form an entity before you sign a lease or incur other significant liabilities personally, right? Because we want those liabilities to belong to the LLC, not to you individually. Now, as I said a minute ago, if you do have significant liabilities that belong to you individually that you want to have belong to the LLC, what you do is assign those to the LLC. You can also assign assets to the LLC so that it holds the things in order to do this business. And then finally, when to form an entity. I'm especially wanting you to form an entity if you have a partner, because of the not being in the general partnership soup that we talked about before. All right, next slide. Instead of breaking for reflection small group, let's actually just break for questions with me quick about what we've talked about so far.
I have a question.
Please.
When you're talking about an LLC and kind of protecting your personal assets by setting up the LLC, I'm a little bit confused about how that works because, you know, if you're getting a business loan or a home equity line of credit or something like that, then those are tied into your assets with those debts that you have. Can you explain a little bit more about how the LLC would protect my personal assets?
Yes, and you give interesting examples as well. One problem here is that banks are really good at getting paid. And so we can protect entrepreneurs with the corporate form, but then banks do an end run around us by requiring personal guarantees. And I think that's the experience that you have had that is actually underlying that question. We see banks do a lot of requiring personal guarantees, especially for young businesses that don't have a track record yet, because banks always want to have some collateral that they can act against if they're going to make a loan.
Okay. So then the
yeah.
LLC is more so protecting me in terms of like a legal situation where somebody might go after me, then my personal assets that are not tied to the business are not going to be impacted if somebody would come after me legally.
Agreed. Yeah, either maybe it was a slip and fall on your business premises, like some sort of like litigation like that.
Okay.
Or a contract claim, right? Somebody says you didn't deliver the thing that you contracted to deliver, or it wasn't up to standards or something. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So legally, it's more for a legal situation versus financial.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, as your business starts to actually have assets, or if the business owns its own building, then you can get the bank loan to collateralize against the building itself. But at the beginning stages, generally, a bank that makes a loan to a small business is going to require a guarantee from somebody with money or a security of something. And so a lot of entrepreneurs end up having to do that as a security against their house or a home equity line of credit or something like that, which is personal. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Good question. Other questions?
I do have a question about tax ID number, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
I applied for a Minnesota tax ID number, which I have. But I don't know if I actually need it. I don't have any employees, so I did not apply for an EIN.
Okay.
But maybe I should do that. I recently had to give a W-9 form to a client who I invoiced. So they asked for my W-9 form, which I tried to fill out the best I could, but there's no line for a tax ID number. You either provide your social security number or your EIN.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not form the business with my social security number. I formed it with a Minnesota state tax ID number. So, but the EIN is 2 digits longer than the state tax ID number. So I knew that there wasn't really a place to put it on the W-9 form. Anyway, so I filled it out incorrectly the first time, I think, and then I filled it out again using my social security number. But now I'm wondering if I need to change my tax ID through the state to my social security number instead of the.
I'm glad that you raised this. Basically, every business needs an EIN with the IRS, whether you have employees or not. So I would track back and get that EIN with the IRS, which is free. And I'm going to give you guys a link to do that in just a minute. And then you'll have that EIN to put on your W-9s going forward, as you have to give those to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also nice that you're not having to give your personal social to people you're doing business with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. All right, let's dig further into taxes. Let's go there. Next slide, please.
Actually, we have a question from
Oh, sure.
Does each business have to have a separate entity? Which I think the answer is no, correct?
Correct. I mean, okay, so let's think about even large businesses that we know. I'm trying to think of something that has multiple lines of business that we all know.
Like Tesla?
Oh, I don't know. Sorry, what?
I said like Tesla, because I think they have multiple products like vehicles and then solar shingles, and then I don't know if that's true.
It's an interesting idea. Yeah. Let's pick something smaller. Let's think about like Inga Bretzens. All right. So imagine Inga Bretzens on Lake Street. Remember, they have the cute little Scandinavian clothing store, and they have the little meat market part, which is actually the oldest part of Inga Bretzens. And maybe they also have, an online store that ships everywhere, whatever. Okay. They could do all 3 of those activities under the same entity. Let's say they have an LLC. I don't represent Inga Bretzens or whatever. I just love them. So that's why I thought of that as an example. Okay. You can do diverse business activities under the same LLC. The question of when you want to make different LLCs mostly comes down to what assets and liabilities do you want to protect from one another? When is your business so distinct for reporting or for insurance or something that it makes sense to isolate it? And so I have, for instance, worked with real estate entrepreneurs who every building that they buy, they put it in a separate LLC. Because if something happens in that LLC, like the building burns down, or it has to make an insurance claim, or there's a slip and fall or something, and those things like maybe bankrupt the assets of that LLC, its sister LLCs are unaffected. Okay, it isolates the liabilities. You don't have to do that, but that's when we would want to do it, is if we feel like we want to isolate the liabilities. The other reason that we end up with well, there are more. Okay, another common reason that we end up with multiple LLCs is if we want to have different owners. Okay, so again, let's think about our real estate investors, right? We're going to own this building with these two partners, but we're going to own this building with just this other person. Okay, so like imagine we have different cap tables, we have different ownership, got to have a separate LLC. You can also set up LLCs so they are like subsidiaries or related families of companies. That's another thing that you see often as businesses get bigger. As an entrepreneur starting out, I would try to not do too much of that kind of complexity because it really increases your accounting complexity and your ability to, like, you're going to have to keep separate books for each of those LLCs. And to the extent that, like, I don't know, you had the intellectual property in one LLC, but the building in another one, then they need to have accounting going back and forth, right? The building LLC is paying for the intellectual property LLC for using the intellectual property or whatever. It gets complicated fast. So don't take on that complexity until you are ready to deal with that complexity. Does anybody have specific facts they want? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I have basically a LLC under one name, and it's an architecture firm, but I have this little side project that I'm giving a related name.
Okay.
But it doesn't need to be an LLC, and I don't know if it's ever going to end up being a profitable thing or if it's just going to support, the LLC. But let's say at some point soon I reserve a domain name for that. Is there a way of just reserving that name or protecting that name so maybe another business doesn't get it? Or do you have any thoughts about what to do with something like that?
Yeah, so reserving a name is kind of tied in, to the intellectual property of the business and so forth. I think you're on the right track. You can, let's see, under Minnesota law, you have rights to a name that you use in commerce. You don't have to actually like make an additional filing in order to have rights to a name. Now, of course, those rights don't go super far. Somebody else could certainly like use that name, but then you would have the right to sue them and to argue that you have the better rights to the name, right? So reserving websites, including websites that you never make live, is a great way to try to keep people from infringing on your name. You can also do I'm trying to remember the exact name, something like a reservation of name filing with the Minnesota Secretary of State, and that's slightly cheaper than forming an LLC. But I would say it's of limited utility because it doesn't change that same legal standard that you have rights to a name that you use in commerce. And so by putting it, either having the website or putting it on the products that you're selling or something, you kind of have those same rights. But if you're worried that somebody would take your LLC name before you get a chance to form it, that would be a way to reserve it for yourself.
I didn't know about that bit about you have rights to a name. Can you say that again? You have rights to a name you use in commerce? It seems pretty broad, but
well,
that's interesting.
Yes, and like you can't protect a super common name, right? Like if I said I'm the Minnesota cannabis lawyer, well, those are all just really normal words. Like, I can't really I don't really have like trademark or copyright rights to that. But if you have some kind of, interesting twist on a name or a brand name, you can seek to protect that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
I got a question.
Please.
So I'm in the food business, right? And what
I thought maybe.
And what I understand is that what you're saying is that we don't really need to address or sign up for LLC if you know your business not going to be profitable. That's what I understanding, or I'm getting wrong.
Um, I think that is wrong. I think
Wrong. Okay.
yeah, there's still
So
value
can
in having
I?
an LLC even if your business is not profitable, because what it means is, so that's a
Why do
loss, right? You make either a
you?
profit or a loss. That loss then belongs to the LLC as opposed to you personally.
I mean, okay. So if I wanted to get a second, um, let's say a food truck. If I want to start at a food truck, that food truck can be under the LLC that I have right now, or can be just in addition other business just to see if work out or not.
Either one would be fine. I think that's the same answer that I said before about how much complexity you want to put onto it for now, right? The same business could own both the food you
Yeah.
have now plus the truck, or
Okay.
if you needed the truck to be owned like in a different way with a different partner, something like that, then you could form another LLC.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You're
Keep
very
listening here, okay? When I'm working.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's move on.
Jen, can I ask a quick question
Oh,
as well?
sure. Yeah, please.
Is there any advantage, for my example specifically, I have an LLC that owns a commercial building, and then I'm starting a separate LLC right now. And the idea is in a couple years, when my tenant's lease is up, the LLC I'm starting might be able to move into that commercial building. Is there an advantage for one LLC to rent from or invoice or work with another LLC that you own?
That is definitely a thing you can do, to have an LLC invoice or work with. I mean, it's weird, right? Because it's all just you, but like you, and they do have legal life, right? So you have to think about them as separate entities with separate books, and they're paying each other and so forth. And it is okay to have affiliated entities with common ownership, and it is okay for them to make, you know, sweetheart deals with one another. Is there an advantage to having different ones? I think that's just down to the same analysis. If it makes sense for them to have different books, or they have different ownership or something.
Okay, but there's no like real tax advantage in that scenario. Like it wouldn't make sense. Like if I'm looking for a commercial space, I could really just look anywhere. There wouldn't be a specific financial advantage to work with my existing LLC.
Does your existing LLC have like a history of operations that would make it easier for it to get a bank loan?
Potentially.
So that would be an advantage.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's all I can think of offhand.
So you're kind of taking that financial history and leveraging that. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, you're so welcome. All right, let's talk about taxes. All right, let's do it. Okay. So we're going to go into less detail in this part. Okay, we're going to fly through this, especially because we already touched on some of the stuff, but let's just look at it straight. Okay, so everybody needs an EIN. Don't pay anybody to get an EIN. There are, if you Google how do I get an EIN, you'll find lots of people on the internet who would like you to pay them $99 or whatever. Don't pay them. Just go to the irs.gov one and get an EIN. Minnesota tax ID, you only need if you are like selling things or employing people, excuse me, in Minnesota. So if you have like an online services business or something like that, you may not need a Minnesota tax ID. And similarly, Minnesota makes it, I think, pretty easy to get those and to understand how taxes work and so forth. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, there's also these unemployment related taxes that depending on the structure of your entity and whether you have employees, you may need to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. You may need to pay federal unemployment tax, and you may need to pay state unemployment taxes. Let's go to the next slide. So how are you going to know if you need to pay those? Encourage you to spend some time with the resources from DEED and the Minnesota Department of Revenue, thinking about your kind of business and the standard. I have helped a couple of businesses that didn't pay things like unemployment taxes or sales taxes, and that's not a great discovery. You know, farther down the line, right? That's a large tax bill, even if like we discover it, not, you know, if it's not like, it's especially bad if the IRS or the Minnesota Department of Revenue discovers it, then they want the money plus, you know, interest and back payments. But sometimes I have discovered it as an attorney as well. Oh, really? You haven't been charging sales tax? That's a lot of money that, you know, so figure it out ahead of time. And another complication with taxes is especially things like sales taxes that you have to get from your customers. You're going to need to make sure that you have your point of sale system set up to collect the right sales taxes. And I think that that's actually in the next operations part of your day today. All right, next slide. Oh, more resources. These are in your packet. Next slide, please. All right, licenses and permits. Oh, Andrea, please.
Yeah, now that you're talking about those sales taxes, I just find out the city where I work for, they changed the taxes, and I was not aware about that. My sales taxes.
Okay.
So what or how I'm looking at that, how I can fix it.
If you are just a little behind, then I would reach out to the city itself and ask for help. Like, what are the new taxes? What do I need to be doing? And how do I make this right? Often there are people that work for cities that are really kind and helpful people who can help you figure things out. If you are really behind, like if you owe tens of thousands of dollars to the IRS, then you might want, then somebody in that position might want to instead hire an attorney who specializes in that kind of thing, because maybe they can negotiate that payment down or get some kind of protection. Because if you're really behind, then it can really sink a whole business and create criminal liability. Yeah, doesn't sound like you're in that soup, but just for the record.
Yeah, no, I'm not in that situation. What I noticed is, like, I'm going to give you a sample. My sales taxes was 7.35% for my sales taxes, and I just find out it was not the right amount. It's supposed to be 9.75. So instead of me doing 9.75, I was doing 7.35. So that's going to affect me. Should I keep it like that? Should I change it? What I should do for that? That was my question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you should change it to the right amount as quickly as you can, accurately. And then probably with the city, you're going to have to figure out, do you owe them some back taxes on past sales?
Okay, so do you think that will be something that me and my accounting should taking care, or should I get to them and find out, like, since when they change it and since I own that difference?
Yeah, I think hopefully your accountant could help you. Yeah, those are the important facts. And then your accountant should be able to help you figure out how much you owe in back taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that as a comment, just, so anybody else is in my spot, to look for those things, because as new owners, we don't know a lot of the things. And that was something that it surprised me. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and thank you for the answer. Keep listening, okay?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with everybody. You're so right. Yeah, similarly, like cannabis taxes, there's an extra 10% on sales of hemp-derived beverages and edibles that not everybody's been paying. That creates some extra fun tax surprises. So, Christy, please.
So I know that we have to file for an EIN. Is there an additional number, that tax ID, or is that the tax ID that the only number that we need to file for?
Yeah, the EIN is the federal tax ID.
Okay.
And then you'll probably also file for a Minnesota state tax ID.
Okay.
So when people say tax ID, depending on the context, they might mean the federal or the state one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is just a reminder as you work to set up your business to also do a little bit of thinking about whether you need licenses and or permits for your business. And we raised that here because, and let's go on to the next slide, because licenses, first of all, Minnesota loves licenses and permits. We have more of them than most states. And arguably that protects the public, etc. But it also adds complexity and things that we can mess up on as entrepreneurs. So I encourage you to take a little bit of time and think about what licenses and permits you might need as a business. They might be related to your space, right? Building permits, zoning permits, environmental permits, depending on what you're doing, okay? They might also be occupational licenses, right? Certainly as a psychologist, you already know that you needed that one, Maureen. You know, whatever kinds of occupational licenses you and your employees might need. And then finally, if you are in a regulated industry, for instance, you're selling alcohol or cannabis or something else that is carefully regulated. And the reason that we raise this is because getting some of those, especially those kind of permits, but really any of these three, can be a long process, right? You don't want to set up a business that, oh no, in retrospect, you were supposed to have gone to cosmetology school in order to do, or you were supposed to apply for a alcohol license with the city of St. Paul, and that takes 3 months or something like that. Okay, so I encourage you to think broadly, try to identify what you're going to need and work that into your plan towards launch so that it doesn't catch you by surprise later down the line. The St. Paul, their city website has a great like set of the things that they care about that you might need to apply for. However, remember, and let's go on to the next slide, that we need to think about federal, state, city, possibly county. We need to think about licenses and permits. We need to think about zoning. And then probably you guys don't need to think about bonding. Bonding is especially like in the construction industry when you need to put down a chunk of money in order to do a project, in order to sort of guarantee that it's going to happen. And so those are all pieces that would be bad surprises if they hadn't been part of your upfront business plan. Okay, questions about licenses and permits? I know that's super broad, but it's because you guys are all doing interesting things in different industries. And so I just try to speak to it really broadly. All right. So that is the end of my prepared remarks. What other questions do you have for me? And as you think of those, I really should add a slide on this, but I'm just gonna speak to it. I feel like one of the things that I often am asked sort of impliedly in this is, when do I need a lawyer and when do I not need a lawyer? All right, which is a great question for entrepreneurs. Okay, so you don't need a lawyer to form an LLC, get an EIN, file your FinCEN, scope out your business, do the business planning. Usually most business lawyers are not particularly helpful in business planning. They're willing to help you do that. And certainly if it's worth your time to have somebody file an LLC for you, business lawyers can do that. Business lawyers can be really helpful when you get to sort of the next step of tasks. An operating agreement is something that you could get a form online, though some of them are bad. It's also something that a business lawyer can certainly help you with. And then as you start to enter into major contracts for your business, your lease, maybe you have a distribution agreement, some sort of other agreements about, supply agreements or how money, whatever, those are things that it may be really useful to have a lawyer look at. It's always a hard call as a small entrepreneur because you've got a lot of things that you're trying to figure out what to do with your money. And I see people every day who enter into contracts in those early stages that then they regret. And sometimes if they had talked to a lawyer, they could have changed that outcome. Other times they couldn't because that was just the terms that the counterparty would give them when they were new and they didn't have any negotiating power. So I don't know. As somebody who loves entrepreneurs, that's my advice about when you need a lawyer. I guess it's also a reminder that sometimes people think you only need a lawyer when you get in trouble, and that's not true, right? Like somebody like me, and there are lots of business lawyers in the world. This is not a gen ad, whatever, okay? But somebody like me, I never go to court. Like I only just try to help people set things up right the first time or fix their paperwork if it's not what they wanted it to be. Like, so don't wait to talk to a lawyer until things are on fire. They can help you more guide as you get going than waiting until everything is, really needs fixing. Okay, what other questions do you have for me? Either about this stuff or about when one might need a lawyer or what kind of lawyer you need. Actually, that's the other thing about lawyers. We are as specialized as doctors, right? You wouldn't go to a cardiologist for a big toe that has an infection, right? But like at least doctors can say, I'm a cardiologist, I'm a podiatrist. We as lawyers are like not allowed to talk about our areas of expertise very openly because of the way that our licensing structure works. So if you know that you need a lawyer to help you with certain kinds of problems, I suggest Google something like lawyer to draft an operating agreement, lawyer to review a distribution agreement, or whatever. And then you'll get a long list of lawyer websites that you'll have to look through and look, do they do that kind of work? Another thing you can do is ask a lawyer in your life or who is married to someone in your life for a recommendation, or at least what kind of lawyer do I need? And they'll say, oh, that's an estate planning matter. That's a family law matter. That's a whatever. And then you'll have some of the search terms that you need to find a lawyer. It's not a great system. And something I think about a lot is like, how can we make that better? But anyway, that's my advice on navigating the broken system. Finally, when you find lawyers that you might want, it is just fine to ask for a free consultation. Just know that in that free consultation, you're probably not going to be able to like ask all your questions and therefore you don't need to hire the lawyer, right? Because then they don't make any money either. So instead, it's a way for you to do like what my college kids would call a vibe check, right? Does this person have the right expertise that I want? Do I like them? Do they seem like they know how to do things in a way that works for me? And feel free to do a vibe check with several people who seem like maybes, and then you can pick one to actually help you with the thing. Some lawyers don't do initial consults because we've gotten burned. Everybody's like, okay, I got 15 minutes. I have 15 minutes of questions. Like, that's not what this was. I'm not a helpline. So anyway. Thanks for laughing at my jokes. Those of you that are laughing at my jokes, I appreciate it. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I have a question.
Please.
Okay, so I'm a makeup artist. I've been in the beauty industry for about 10 years. Like starting off, I kind of just like freelance, and that's kind of where I'm at right now as well too, is freelancing. But this is what brought me here because I want to make sure I do things right. You know, like I've never had any issues as far as like someone breaking out or anything like that. Like I always want to cover myself just in case that happens. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I feel like I'm everywhere, to be quite honest. And I just want to make sure that I'm prioritizing what needs to be prioritized. And then also in addition to that, like thinking about licensing and permits. I know in the state of Minnesota, you don't need to have a actual license because it's not like it's not permanent makeup. It's just a temporary thing. But nevertheless, with all that being said and all your knowledge, like I'm just trying to make sure I did everything right. So how can you get my head on like straight? Because I'm an overthinker too. So I'm like, I don't want to, you know, get in trouble, do anything wrong as far as like the EINs and all that stuff. I just need some help and guidance. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You've got this. It sounds like you know your trade. And so I think the pieces for you to add in, you know, from my session, it's filing an LLC when it's time, you know, picking the name you want, and then getting a business bank account and doing business through that bank account. But even before that, I would say, and hopefully this course is helpful on these sort of things, you know, figure out where you want your business to go. What kind of customers do you want to serve? How are you going to find those customers? How are you going to charge those customers? Right? Lots of ways to do this. But in my experience, people are often more successful at marketing themselves if they have a specific lane that they are able to talk about in an exciting way, as opposed to, I could do this, I could do that, you know, whatever you need. It like doesn't resonate with people as much.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Jen, I just had something, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but
Sure.
this time of year coming up to the end of the year, my husband and I have a couple of LLCs in the state of Minnesota, and we get a lot of mailings from companies that really look like they're the Secretary of State, and they're letting us know for a small fee that they're going to help us file our annual update. And they really, really are hard to tell that they're actually third-party companies. Just want to charge you for that, but you can update for free on the Minnesota Secretary of State website, because we actually ended up paying for that one year, just kind of getting tricked. Almost scam-like, but you know, you actually do end up with the registration. But I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone with an existing LLC, that you do not need to pay for that. And you may have mentioned that already.
I did not, and I really appreciate you saying that, Susan. Yes, I get so many of those mailings because I get them for all the LLCs I have formed for my clients for the whole year. And I'm like, guys, come on. Recycle all of that. We don't need any of that help. But yeah, I think they must make a lot of money from people that are worried, you know, that they don't know what to do.
I'm so glad you said that, because I received a couple of those envelopes too, and they're like from Naples, Florida. And then you read them, and then in the fine print, it says something about this isn't an official document or something. And then you realize it's a scam. But when you first get it, you're like, wait, what's going on? So yeah, it's tricky. Thank you for saying that.
Agreed. One other tip, by the way, as you're starting and you start to have this important paperwork, your LLC, your EIN number, key contracts, whatever, have a place that you save those, that you could find them in 3 or 5 years. Figure out what that place is and remember. I know so many entrepreneurs who look to sell their successful business down the line, and they can't find those things from the first year or two of business at all. Like eventually they set up systems. It's hard. It's hard at first. And probably you'll set up a better system than the one you set up now. But you know, put them somewhere. And then once you set up those systems, move it into the real system or whatever. Because you're gonna need that stuff. Especially like your operating agreement and the other stuff that's not public. Your when you file your LLC with the Secretary of State, then you can always buy those articles back from the Secretary of State for like $15. So I'm not so concerned about that. But the EIN number, the IRS, like you apply for it and it's like on a web page and they're like, save this web page. And you're like, how do I save a web page, IRS? Like, oh, so print it as a PDF, take a screenshot, just print it to your printer. I don't know, but then you got to save that because you're going to need that number and it's like hard to get it. It's hard to find it again.
Yeah, I do not have any kind of record of my Minnesota state tax ID because I wrote it down, so I have the number, but I don't have an email with it or anything. So I think that's another good point you just.
Related to that, what's the best way to save that information? I mean, obviously paperwork is usually, you're not going to lose that, but like I have most everything that I have saved on a hard drive. And then I'm like, should I be backing all that up on a second hard drive? Or should I be saving things on a cloud somewhere where it's not ever going to get lost? Or is there risk with saving things like that on a cloud?
I am not a security expert, but what I do personally is back everything up to the cloud because I figure if there was a fire or a natural disaster or something at my house or my office, I want to have it saved somewhere else in the world. So I when I was a solo entrepreneur, I used Dropbox Business to back up my files, and I just had like all my files back up automatically there. It was okay. There are other solutions too. I think Microsoft SharePoint is pretty easy for Office using folks. Yeah, but I would spend a minute having some kind of backup, especially because computers die. And I know, sorry, I sound like so morbid, right? Like everything is gonna, whatever, be destroyed at any time. Sorry, it's the occupational hazard of being a corporate lawyer. We have to think about like what could go wrong so that then we can get in front of that and like not have that be a problem. So
no, that's a fear of mine all the time with just having things on the hard drive, which, I think that's better than saving it on my computer. But at the same time, I'm still like, I could get lost, it could get damaged, and then I would lose all those files. So I keep worrying, like I should probably be backing up everything I'm saving on here, but then I'm going to have to constantly update what I'm saving over to the other second hard drive or the second location or whatever. So I get so overwhelmed with thinking about trying to maintain all the files that I'm like, I'm just going to keep it all here.
yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah, time is precious. I think there are ways that you can set it up with Dropbox or SharePoint that are like anything saved in this group of files just gets updated automatically to a copy that's elsewhere. So that once you set it up, you don't have to remember to actually update it.
That's a good tip. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Jen. This is Shayna.
Hey, Shayna.
Thank you. So I just wanted to back up a little bit, and you've talked quite a bit, on our podcast about licensure and things like that. So my business essentially is going to be a mix of non-hemp derived products as well as hemp derived. I wanted to kind of like let things clear out through this first round of licensure and see what the state does. So what do you suggest? And I guess I just need clarity on that. Would I need to file as a regular non-cannabis business and then get that license? Or do I need dual? Like, do you understand what I mean? Like, just say, for instance, if I go to like a market, would I need to just have like a regular LLC, or do I need that additional license if I'm selling like hemp derived like lotions or things like that? Not gummies or anything, but if it meets that percentage, I guess that's what I'm trying to get clarity on in terms of the filing.
So from a corporate perspective, the LLC issues are the same as we've talked about before. Nothing special about cannabis LLCs. Except that if you were participating in a highly regulated market like the adult use cannabis market, I would suggest having a separate LLC own that and apply for that adult use license, because those books are going to be so different because of 280E taxation
Right.
and the other kind of crazy things about adult use cannabis regulation. To your question about, do you need a license to sell hemp derived things? Minnesota just requires that free registration
Right, okay.
to sell hemp derived beverages, edibles, topicals. For now, OCM is gonna roll out licensure for hemp derived after the adult use market opens, and I don't expect it to be nearly as painful as adult use licensure, but you know, just stay tuned for
Okay,
what they require for that. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
I would
You're
also
welcome.
review that with your business insurance, if you have any of that set up. One of the insurance agents that I frequently talk to has been talking about a lot of businesses opening up with the hemp options and the THC options, and he's talking about the significant impact to their insurance plan. So I would, if you have insurance set up already, I would review that with them as well and make sure that you have a good agent that knows that well.
Oh, I'll talk to Corey.
Mhm.
Corey Lake.
Corey
Thank you.
Lake is the cannabis
Yeah.
insurance guy. He's great.
Thank
But
you.
it is expensive.
Yeah.
And you know, we should probably mention insurance in this part of the presentation. Because insurance is a super important part of guarding against these kind of big risks that we keep talking about, you know. But it also gets really expensive really fast, and there are lots of different kinds. So yeah, insurance. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, I think I should let you guys have a little time to talk about operations. It has been so fun to get to know you and your businesses a little bit. And I wish you all the very best as you move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Jen. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
All right, everybody. We're going to go through operations super quick. And as I told you, we were probably not getting this break. We're not getting that break. Or we won't be able to get all this info in there. So key terms when we're talking about operations. Operations is just like a word. And a lot of times people are like, I don't even know what fully that means. Operations are really the daily activities and processes involved in the production, delivery, and management of products or services, which is a big fancy way of saying how your business works, how things get done, who does them, whose job is what thing, how does your business operate? Taking you back to early high school math, we have an order of operations in order to solve equations. Your business is an equation, and your operations are how your business runs, how you solve your business, is a good way to think of it. I cannot see my speaker notes, and I know there's some good juicy info in there. So hold on, I'm going to share a second time. 1 second. Wow, Zoom just disappeared. I'm sorry, I'm always having these problems. I swear, like I'm like 30 and tech savvy. This never seems to happen when we're in this Zoom. Okay, here we go. All right. Granted, I still can't see my speaking notes. There they are. Okay, great. We're going to talk a little bit about point of sale systems. Your point of sale systems, it's literally just the software that allows you to get paid. So you can think a POS system can be as complex as things you see in restaurants, or they can be as simple as a little square reader that you plug into your phone, right? We're also going to talk about invoicing. and how to do invoicing and when you should invoice versus when you should use point of sale, etc. An invoice is just a bill listing out the products and services that have been provided. A lot of times an invoice is sent after the service or product has been sent or completed. Operations are the connection between your plans and your results. So obviously you have your business plan, your mission, your vision, and then you have strategy. And the results are going to be that revenue, profit, success that you're looking for. So businesses start with a strategy and hopefully a business plan, a mission, and a vision. Right now, you're all sort of creating your strategy with your business plan. Typically, business owners are really great at this part. This is why we usually have a CEO and a COO in a company. The CEO kind of has the big ideas and the COO kind of works on bringing them to life. But in order to bring those things to life, you need a plan and a way to connect sort of your strategy and your results. Operations is that path or kind of that roadmap between the two. Here's a business plan, here's where I want to go, and operations is how I get there, is another way that you can think about it. Operations include the who, what, where, when, and how much of your business. Who, the people in charge of specific tasks, right? Who's unlocking the, like, let's say you own a clothing store. Who's unlocking the door every morning? Who's turning the lights on? Who's counting in the registers? Who's facing the product? Who's checking people out? Who's managing the other employees? Who's in charge of HR? You know, it really depends on the unique needs of your business. But the who is really like, how many people do you need to make this work? And who's in charge of what? The what of your business is really what each person or department or partner is responsible for. So let's say that it's just you, then you're responsible for everything, obviously. But let's say it's you and 2 employees. Obviously, you guys are going to have different delegated tasks. Probably your tasks are going to look different than your employees as a business owner. What is really about how you're dividing the work, what needs to be done, and who it makes the most sense to do it. So you can be really strategic about the what in your operations. Obviously, if you're trying to have like an entry level 20-year-old cashier doing your like back end QuickBooks stuff, that might not be the best use of their time. So operations is also about the strategic way to ensure that everyone is doing the best thing for them, right? The where is, where does the work occur, right? I know for Women Venture, most of us work from home, some of us work in the office, but depending on our roles and the needs and the what in our job description, right, it might change where we are, and it would depend on different times, right? Like I'm in the office in the summers a lot because we teach in-person classes in the summers. But in the winter, I'm usually at home working from home because we don't have in-person classes in the winter. Right, so the where is the work going to occur for each different person involved with your business. This is usually driven by customer needs. So like our clients don't really need us to be open at Women Venture, 5 days a week, 9 to 5, because people don't come into the office that often, which is why we're able to have a hybrid, but mostly work from home model. And we operate by appointment, and that really seems to work for our client base, right? But if you're like a clothing store, right, that's not going to work for you. You need to have a location where people are and are doing the work, especially if it's a brick and mortar. When is the deadlines and timelines for when work is going to be completed? So when does the work happen, right? If you're taking, for example, your young cashier at your clothing store, obviously their timelines are going to look a little different from you as the business owner, right? They're probably not going to be working evenings, weekends. They're typically only going to be there during store hours or shortly before and after closing of the store, right? So the when is each individual person responsible for these things, or when do they need to have these tasks done? Lastly, the how much is really just how much does it cost to run these different areas of your business? What budget does each area department need in order to complete their tasks? How much do people need to be paid for these tasks? So these are all operational considerations. One of the most important operational considerations is obviously going to be how you get paid, right? As we said in session 1 and 2, if your business isn't viable or making you money, then you don't have a successful business. So getting paid is pretty important. When we're talking about getting paid, we're often talking about POS systems, invoicing, and different types of record keeping. So there are a lot of different types of point of sale systems. Your point of sale is really going to be the most common way you'll be paid. This is especially true for product-based businesses, but I know a lot of service-based businesses use these as well. These are just like a couple of examples. Obviously, there are dozens and dozens of different point of sale options, but the most popular are Square. Square is super user friendly. The pros are that it's really versatile. It's suitable for a lot of different types of small businesses. It includes a range of kind of mix and match hardware based on your needs. They have card readers, cash registers, receipt printers, something as small as, like I said, that little adapter that plugs into your phone that people can swipe with. It's got pretty quick setup and it's easy to use. Square also provides inventory management, sales analytics, and it can accept a lot of different payment methods. It's super useful for businesses that need to process transactions both in store and online because it can pull all the information to one place. Another point of sale option is Shopify. If you are going to sell in store and online, Shopify's system could be a really good fit for you. It integrates your online store and your in-person store pretty seamlessly. So if someone buys something online, it gets removed from your inventory on both ends, both in person and online. It's got a lot of different hardware options as well. Got barcode scanners, receipt printers, cash registers. It's also pretty user friendly. And it's got some scale. So it's really good for your business as it grows. So you might start with a like small kind of point of sale through Shopify. And as your business gets bigger, you can add more to your system in order to make it more sophisticated. Lightspeed is a pretty comprehensive POS. It's good for retail and restaurant especially. It's got inventory management, employee management, analytics, customer relationship management. It's got pretty robust reporting capabilities. And it has a pretty wide range of hardware options. It's good for single and multi-location businesses. So if you're someone who plans to have 3 locations, Lightspeed might be a really good solution for you, just because it's made with the intention of being able to be used at multiple locations. When you're picking your POS, because there's a lot of good options out there, you really just want to consider what your needs are. You want to consider things like the ease of use, the compatibility with your business's needs, pricing, how much customer support you're looking for from a POS system. They also often have free trials and demos. Like you can test out these systems for a certain period of time and see if they fit your business or work well for your business. It's really important as you start planning the operational part of your business to spend some time really researching and getting demos from POS systems. So you can figure out which one is going to work best for you. Because like I said, taking payment is how your business stays viable, right? If you can't be paid, then you're going to lose out on a lot of sales. I think of how stressful it is when a business's POS goes down and they can only take cash. That happens sometimes with small businesses. And I always see everyone with like their hair standing on end, like so stressed out. And it's because your POS is really important for you to succeed. Any questions about point of sale systems before I move on? With the caveat that I'm not a point of sale guru, but I can answer basic questions about them. Anybody? Okay, I'll just keep moving along. Another option for getting paid is invoicing. Invoicing is really, again, just sending that document to outline the details of a transaction. An invoice kind of is a formal request for payment, and it's got key information on it to facilitate financial transactions between the business and its customers. The invoice is going to have things like your contact information, your payment due date, the description of the product and service provided, your payment terms. A lot of accounting softwares are going to have invoicing built in. For example, QuickBooks has invoicing features. A lot of other accounting software does as well. Because invoicing often happens after a service is complete, it's really, really important that you have written agreements. Honestly, if you take nothing away from this session on the legal or operational side other than have written agreements with people, I think that would be fantastic. Have written agreements with people, clear due dates, and our process for following up on past due payments, right? So if you do a service for someone and you send out an invoice and it's due on the 15th and it's the 17th and you haven't been paid, you need to have a plan in place for what you do at that point. How do you proceed? How do you collect your money? Do you send them a reminder? Do you call them? Do you have a person who follows up with them, etc.? Because you want to make sure that you're getting paid. Record keeping, it's really important. And I know we've said this over and over, but it's because it is so important. Be diligent in your record keeping. As you're making sales, record keeping is going to be crucial to your long-term success. If you don't have a record of what you're selling, how much you're selling it for, what your profit is, what your losses are, you're not going to be able to make a strategic plan. And I know we talked in session 2, especially about the importance of pre-planning and planning for success, and planning, working backwards with your goals and really tightly planning them. Record keeping helps you do that. By documenting, especially your sales, you're able to stay compliant, especially if you get audited, like randomly audited, or if you need to file your taxes, or you're having, a legal suit against your LLC, God forbid, or anything like that happens, you need to be able to provide very clear records of the sales that you've made and what they were for and who paid for them, right? All of those things are going to protect you. Record keeping is a protection for your business. You should be keeping records from the very beginning. Don't be like, well, I'm still small, I don't need to keep records. Even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, keep a record of the sales that you make. Make it a part of your daily habit. Set aside regular time to look at your metrics and ensure that your business is going to be sustainable. Because a lot of times what happens with businesses is they fall off of their record keeping, or they never kept good records. And then they don't even realize that they're going under until it's too late, right? We've seen a lot of businesses go under in the last few years, especially with COVID. And a lot of times it is because they didn't have super sufficient records. They couldn't see the massive loss coming, right? I think that it's important to consider record keeping as a must, an absolute essential to owning your business. Honestly, if your business is like booming, you should probably have a bookkeeper and an accountant. But if your business is still pretty much in its infancy and it's still small, you definitely want to be using accounting software. And I also recommend that even if you are a bit bigger and you do outsource to an accountant or a bookkeeper or CPA or what have you, that you still keep your own records. I had a client, sometime last year, whose daughter was an accountant and had been doing all of her accounting for her. And she had no idea what the records were or what her accounts looked like. And it turned out that her own daughter had embezzled like $30,000 from her. And it was totally devastating. And she called and she was just like crushed, right? Obviously, because that's awful, but also, right, she felt like she had had something taken from her, and she felt like she had failed herself by not keeping her own records and not seeing this. And it is important as a small business owner, like ultimately it's your business and you want to know what your numbers are. You don't want someone taking advantage of you, or, God forbid, not doing their job when you think they are and finding out when it's too little too late that you didn't know what was going on with your financials. Strong financials are literally the key to your business again. So you really want to keep those effective records. And I know I'm making it sound really big and scary, but it's really important. It's only going to benefit you and empower you, especially because it's your business. So wait, before we move into an example, does anyone have questions? Okay. So here's an example. This is a fictional business called Form. We've talked about Form in previous sessions. Form is a brick and mortar shop that sells ethically sourced high fashion clothing by local designers in sizes extra, extra small, all the way up to 7X. So an example might be the Where, a brick and mortar retail space in the Twin Cities. This requires operational planning for, you're going to need to plan to secure a lease. You're going to need business insurance. You're going to need a POS system. You're going to need to furnish your space. You are going to have to plan out the layout and design of your store. You're going to need inventory and a way to manage that inventory. You need to think about security and safety. Are you going to have cameras? Zoning regulations, licensure, all of those things are going to go into the where section of your operational planning. The who, right, is going to be, who do you need in this house? So the owner of Form probably needs a manager. It's a clothing store, right? Sales associates, a janitor, someone who comes and vacuums and sweeps and keeps the store looking clean. There's also opportunity for partnering and outsourcing here, right? Form probably or could hire marketing, probably needs a bookkeeper. Since the model of this store is based around sourcing clothing from local makers, obviously some of the partners in the business are going to be those clothing makers, other local artists whose wares you might want to sell in the store, an insurance broker to work with you to get insurance for the building. Right, so this is just an example of how you can use the that model of the where, the who, the how much, all of that. You can use that to actually make a list of the things that you need, who you need, what you need, where you need, the time that you need it, etc. So some of the planning needs that you're going to have to consider in order to make these hires and partnerships is that you're going to have to design a hiring process, right? You're going to have a system. You're going to have to design some method of staff onboarding or use an onboarding service. You need to think about workplace compliance. You need to think about providing them health insurance and benefits. You need to determine how much you're going to pay them. You need to think how they're going to record their time, how you're going to schedule them. Are you going to use a scheduling system? Are you going to schedule on paper? You want to think about payroll. Are you doing payroll yourself? Are you giving checks? Are you doing direct deposit? And of course, paying invoices to outside vendors. So if you're buying and then selling someone else's product, you need to be prepared to be paying on those invoices. The when, right? You need to think about product launch deadlines, inventory replenishment timelines, sales and promotions, and long-term planning for business success. You need to identify what your goals and priorities are, break down projects into tasks, and allocate resources and communicate your expectations to your staff. How much considerations? You really are going to want to consider things like inventory cost, staffing costs, operating expenses, marketing and advertising expenses, and a contingency fund. This is another thing that a lot of businesses didn't have when lockdown hit. And this sunk a lot of restaurants, especially who didn't have a contingency fund. A contingency fund is just a fancy way of saying emergency money in case your business stops bringing in revenue or suddenly takes a big hit, right? Let's say there's a flash flood and now your business is trashed and you need to rebuild. Actually, a great example, the 19 bar over in Loring Park recently burned down, I think about a year ago. It's really sad because it's like the oldest gay bar in the continental US. It's been open since the 50s. And a garbage truck backed into a power line and set it on fire and it burned to the ground. And it's been hugely devastating for the owners because they haven't been making any money for like a year. And so they had to crowdfund to try to rebuild, right? They didn't have like a massive contingency fund for if some disaster happened. And obviously, it's really hard to have a contingency fund. I don't know about you guys, but I have a really hard time saving up like emergency funds for my personal life, right? Like it's just like money is tight and it's hard to save money for emergencies, but it's a really important thing to consider for your business. When you are thinking about cost considerations, you want to think about planning for personal budgeting, how you're going to manage your expenses, where you're going to get your money from. Is it just coming from product? Do you also offer services, etc.? What you're paying people, how you're paying yourself, and then how you're staying compliant and reporting, especially if you get grants or anything like that, and you need to submit reports on the work that you're doing. So this is a homework exercise. I want you guys to go into your workbook. It's exercise 4.1. It's really just a brainstorm for your key operational ideas, the things that you're going to need. Even if you don't need a brick and mortar, you still need to make operational decisions. If you're working from home, what part of your home are you working in? What office supplies are you going to need? If you're opening an e-commerce business, where are you going to store your inventory? What tools or software will you need to keep track of that inventory, et cetera, right? So even if your business exists in a virtual space, you still need to plan for operations. Even if you're the sole person working for your business, you still need to plan your operations. Any questions before we do graduation reminders and wrap up? I know we blew through that really fast. Okay. So, graduation reminders and wrap up. Obviously, next Thursday is graduation. You'll be presenting your lightning talks. We're super excited. It is a requirement for graduation that you present your lightning talk. If you don't present your lightning talk, you won't get your certificate, and you also won't get the benefits of graduation, which are those expert advising sessions, graduate check-in calls, etc. Your lightning talk's very simple. There's a template in your workbook. I believe it's at the very front. It's a 2 to 3 minute talk. Oh, sorry, it's towards the very end. Pages 63 to 65. That's going to be where your lightning talk template is. You literally just have to kind of mad lib it, like fill in the blanks. You don't have to memorize it. Don't be nervous. You don't need to make a presentation. All you need to do is fill in the blanks and read it. It's really simple. Please don't stress yourself out. I feel like every graduation, we have clients who are so nervous and overwhelmed and scared. And it's really just for practice for you guys. And we'll have some expert panelists giving feedback, as well as giving live feedback and some written feedback after graduation. It's really just to practice and get feedback. That's it. So don't psych yourself out. That's my best piece of advice. Also, if you are hoping to have us take a look at your business plan and provide feedback, that is optional, of course, it's not required. You need to turn that in on LMS using the template that we provided, which is also on LMS. And you need to send that before graduation, meaning by Wednesday night, you need to have sent that in order for us to get that feedback to you. And that feedback does usually take us about 2 business weeks. Just as an FYI, Becky and I personally read through your business plans and give feedback ourselves. Just especially if we get a bunch, it's going to take us a little bit. So bear with us. Any questions, anything that you guys want to ask me about graduation, anything about tonight, etc.?
I have a question. So I received an email from the 2 I don't know what they were called from last week from our session.
Yeah.
They were just saying, if we wanted to do like a session with them or whatnot. So basically, I guess, with these additional ones that you just referred to, is that included or is that just
No, Lexi and
separate?
Allie are offering their own thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
it does not count as one of your expert advising sessions. Lexi and Allie just very graciously and kindly
Okay.
volunteered to meet with every client, which is very cool and sick of them. So I would definitely take advantage of it if you can. But yeah, no, it won't count. You'll still get 3 additional expert advising sessions.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. Christy?
Is the graduation, is that in person or is that online?
It's still online. Yep. We'll still meet in the same way, just next week. We will take a picture. I got yelled at last cohort because I didn't tell everyone that we were going to take like a screenshot of everyone on camera. So I'm taking a screenshot of all of you on camera at graduation next week. So please be prepared and don't yell at me. Any other questions?
How do we, can you walk us through where to submit the business plan on LMS? I'm not seeing it there.
Let me see. It could be also that Becky just hasn't thrown it up yet. And
there's going to be a specific,
yeah, let me, you know what, in the interest of time, I will check as soon as we sign off and send an email.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course. I'll also send an email with this link if you can't scan this QR code. Please do it. It's so easy. It's just your name and some information, your business name, and just some information so that we can introduce you appropriately next week. It's also super helpful for me if you do this survey and put a phonetic spelling of your name in the body as well, so that I don't mispronounce your name at your graduation, because that sucks. So yeah, I will also send this link in a follow-up email tonight. I will send this link, and if the Dropbox for a business plan isn't up yet, I'll put it up tonight and link you guys to that as well. Anything else before we say adieu until graduation? Alrighty. Well, next session we'll be doing graduation for the first majority of the class. And then we will move into talking about next steps after graduation. How long are the slides available, Cheryl? They are available forever in perpetuity. You can always access Talent LMS. Everything on there will always be on there for you. Yes. So Hannah, the business plan is due in the Dropbox in LMS by, as long as we get it before class on Thursday, I'll still accept it, but try to get it in by Wednesday. And then Thursday is going to be that lightning pitch. Any other questions? All right. I'm so proud of you guys. See you at graduation. I'm excited. I hope you have a great week. Bye, guys.